All right, we're here with the filmmaker behind A Midnight Motel, the Jack Ingram-led Midnight Motel. Michael, tell us who you are.
My name is Michael Tully. I'm a filmmaker and writer now I'm based in Austin, Texas.
So I've got to ask, kind of before we jump into this wonderful short, you jump from the most interesting stories. Like first, like Robert and the family dynamic of that to ping pong, now to this. What the hell are you doing?
I'm marching to the beat of my own muse, the fleetingly hiring muse that it's tough to sort of make a commitment to do things that you connect with and not just sort of cash in. That said, if like a studio called right now while we were talking and offered me, you know, Wolfman 36, I would jump at it probably. But no, I just sort of, I like all kinds of movies. I think that's what it stems from. I've watched over 100 movies this year already, and it's like we're 100 days into 2016. So I'm always watching movies. I love all genres, all types. And I feel like if you put the work in and you make a feature film, I'm so zapped after that my instinct is like, I just did that. There's no need to ever do anything like that again. So I start kind of looking in the other direction, which I've learned is sort of the adverse way to having a career as a filmmaker. You're supposed to do what you did the last time, but a little bit bigger and a little bit better. And just sort of like, okay, that Ping Pong Summer is $1.5 million movie. Now do the comedy with the kids that's about a $10 million movie. And my instinct is just, well, I just did that, so why would I want to do that again? So I think it just stems from loving movies.
But I've got to give you a little bit of a shout out in the fact that your films don't look the same either. Like you step into a film, you tackle it a certain way, but it feels like when you step into something else, maybe even you approach it differently because the films do have their own distinct touch and feel. Like this doesn't look like those films.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And, you know, some people, I love directors who just sort of 2 frames come up and you're like, Jim Jarmusch, I know it already. And I love that. I think for myself, it's maybe even more of a Richard Linklater, someone who kind of can lose themselves in the idea. And there's threads throughout. So you could say for some of my movies, why are the past 3, I think they've had like zooms in them, old school 70s zooms, which you're not supposed to do anymore. So I think you could find little threads. But, you know, with Midnight Motel, which we can get to, that was sort of a for hire. Jack Ingram is a musician in Austin, and that came to me as kind of like a for hire, pitch this project. This artist really believes in this new album, doesn't want to do the traditional, you know, music video thing. So I brought cinema to it, and I said, well, I love like Altman's Fool for Love or those 70s new American films like California Split. And I was like, what if we combine that with the music from the album and tried to make something new? So I do think in that sense, the references are a little bit different. I try to have a little bit of humor in everything, I think. So you could say with Septien, play that in in Germany one night it played like a somber drama and the next night it was a gangbusters comedy, and I love that too. I think that's what makes the films. Maybe Ping Pong Summer, the previous film I'd made, I think that same thing is some people are like, this is terrible acting, terrible directing, what is going on? And then some people get it and they say, oh, maybe this was inspired by the knockoffs of the Karate Kid and this has the same spirit of that, so there's humor within that. But yeah, every project is different, I think, so it's not like I'm just trying to put a stamp and just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Well, keep doing it because it's working.
I appreciate that. It makes it for a harder life to pay the mortgage, to take this approach to the world. But yeah, I believe in it. At the end of the day, I think I will look back in a music documentary I'd made years ago, Silver Jew, about David Berman and the Silver Jews. If I look at my IMDb page or whatever, I think I would be kind of proud ultimately looking back and saying I did lots of different genres and had fun doing it also.
Let's talk about Jack and getting into this album in particular and why he wanted to maybe do something different. It feels like this album is different from all that we've heard and know of Jack.
Yeah, I think Jack rides this really interesting line and he can speak to it way better. You know, I was peripherally familiar with him and my musical instincts are kind of all over the table. But he hasn't put a record out in quite a while, but he's still in the mix, you know. He's had a #1 song and I think all these things that, but he rides this line of, I think he described it once as like, I'm on the fringe of mainstream and I'm on the bigger side of indie land. And it's just it's a hard place to be if you want to ride that line. And I think even in some ways my filmmaking doesn't get placed easily because of that. And I think Jack sort of has the talent, has the looks, has the skills to be like super mainstream, but then he's like loves the Waylon and the Chris Christopherson and Townes Van Zandt, Steve Earle, the like true school guys, and he has the ability to do both. And I think that's where Midnight Motel, it feels like him speaking to me about it, was this is the first album where I think he feels like he got both of those things aligned. It wasn't like maybe trying to chase a #1 song, and it wasn't just being two in his own head. It was sort of fusing the two, both of his instincts.
Can we talk about Heather and casting her? And I mean, I'm a big fan, but I love her in this role. She seems to kind of have fun with this as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had initially, so Jack I had never met before, and I pitched him on it. He drove me, it's funny, it was almost a year ago, maybe 10 months ago, he drove me up to Dallas. He was playing a show, and he said, I'm so busy, we never have time to sit down. Why don't you get in the car with me, ride up to Dallas, and I'll put you on a plane and fly you back home, and you'll be home by the nighttime, but we'll have had 3 hours of actual talking about this project, which was great. But my wife and I drove up from Austin yesterday, and we did the same thing. We stopped at the kolache place, and it was too busy, and went across the street to the other one. I was like, this is the exact same thing that Jack and I did about a year ago, but now we're coming here to show this film. But within that, I think like, it came together pretty quickly. So there's that sense of Jack's very well connected. You know, he just did his big fundraiser with Matthew McConaughey. And I had written this thing. I was like, man, if you really want this to bump, like, I wrote this part for this Barfly. Get Matthew McConaughey. Get Matthew to show up, you know? And it's like, the world doesn't work that way. It's like, oh, he's doing this huge movie up in the Northwest, and we're shooting this next weekend. But along with that, I just, from the very beginning, I think Heather Kafka's a great actress. I've gotten to know her well since I've lived in Austin. And just as soon as this project came up, she was in my mind. Jack, I don't know if he was super familiar with her, but then I talked to him about her, and he had seen some of her work, and he realized. And then I just sort of pitched him on it, and then they got together, and it was just like, that's where I feel like maybe I'm not a great director, maybe all those things, but I'm like, the casting thing, I think bringing them together was a really great stroke, because Jack is a real actor. I think that's part of this also, was he wanted to show that he could be a real actor. But those two together, they just sort of clicked, engaged, and they lifted each other to a higher level. And she's just so convincing, you know? Like, she had to be really emotional in this short film. And I don't like the sort of Lars von Trier of like, how can I make Heather feel terrible and make her cry? You know, it's like, I want to have a really good, honest connection and then let her bring herself to it. But that was an intense day that they were, you know, really emotional, but I kind of stayed out of the way of them. They would be in the room before the cameras were rolling, we were outside. I would at least do a few little pointers of just sort of where we're trying to get with the scene. And then just hearing them on the microphone warming each other up was some seriously heated action. but that's like the fireworks, to get it to feel like a marriage and to feel like that the blue flame with the bar in the film is called the Blue Flame, and Jack told me that, of just like the harder the fire burns in love is like that blue flame is closer to the wick, and that's where like the real heat is, and that's what we were trying to bring out through this film. And Heather just gets it, you know, she's been doing it forever, but she still is just natural and great.
What about syncing it to the music and that process? That must have been fun and unique in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes it tricky. Ultimately, this is a promo for a record, but I didn't want to just, that sounds cheesy and like icky to me. So what I pitched was, it's not going to be a music video. Ultimately, there will be a lot of Jack's music, but why don't we think of this as its own kind of record, a film where people will want to watch it again because the pieces are a little bit open and you can sort of connect dots. So treat it more like music, and ultimately fans, I think, are going to be most excited about that, to see Jack, and then there's an original performance of a song or two songs, and then some of the songs from the record. But yeah, I think that was the trick, was to sort of make something that felt cinematic, Like it felt like real drama, but then ultimately we are serving this music. And I think initially Jack wanted it to be long form, to be as long as the record. And I was like, how much are we getting for this? Like, how much money is raised? And I think my job was to say, we can make something responsibly on this budget that feels like a world unto itself. So I think in a perfect world, maybe there would have been this 50-minute, hour-long sort of semi-feature. But at that point, I said, if we have this much money, this much time, this is probably the responsible way to do it. But it's funny, we got the first notes we got back. You do this first cut, and then you send to the powers that be. And you know it's always not there yet. It's like that's the part of the process. There's going to be back and forthing. And it was maybe like 14 minutes was the first cut. The finished film now is like 10 minutes and 45 seconds. But I knew, I was trying to get feedback, and I think there was one note was just like, there's not, like the music really isn't in there, and this is the whole point of this is to be for Jack's music. And then I went back and mathematically broke it down and was like 10 and a half of the 14 minutes had Jack's music in it, but it was laid in a different way. It wasn't just hyper prominent like a music video or a commercial. So when he's in the bar, there's a scene, like it's a drama scene in a bar, but in the background, the song is in there. And I just thought that would be more interesting and more fun for viewers to sort of not make it just 4 Jack Ingram songs with visuals connected to it. So like thinking back now, I think there are 5 songs from the record that made it into a 10-minute film, and it's pretty predominantly music. But I take that as a compliment or a credit to the film, that people would be like, oh, is there that much music? I didn't notice there was that much music. And you're like, watch it again. And it's like pretty full of music. And that was just my background as being, film and cinema versus just being commercial or music video.
For the festival itself, it's in its 10th year, but it's an older connection to Deep Ellum, and the section you're in, the Deep Ellum Sounds, is that hark back to James and way back when Michael Caine started this, and those original elements. So I know it's a section that they're very proud of. What does it mean for you to be in that section and to realize that this is one of the showcase pieces, especially for James Faust?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a real honor because, and Jack's connection also, I think he's a Dallas guy, and it just felt like this is would be the right festival to screen this sort of thing. And then for them to pair us with a feature with Keith Maitland's A Song for You, which I still have not seen. I've seen Tower. Keith Maitland, I'm calling him the Alex Gibney of Texas film because he has like 18 documentaries in this festival. But yeah, it's a real honor because you make this stuff and ultimately you could say deep down on paper, this is a for hire promo for a record, but I was trying to make something that would be able to screen at something as prestigious as this festival and in the Deep Ellum, this section, and for those guys to recognize it's great. I mean, I think shorts blocks are awesome. I went to one yesterday and I love them. Every festival I go to, I try to watch shorts blocks, but when you get paired with a sort of prominent feature, that inherently lifts you up even further and makes your little short film that you worked on, it takes it a little more seriously. So yeah, I'm humbled and I'm just really grateful. I haven't been to the festival yet, and I was talking with my wife about this yesterday. It's like I kind of can't wrap my brain around that it's been 10 years because it's sort of built such a reputation for itself that I felt like it was one of those regional ones that's been going for 20 or 30 years, and this is like the 10th year. And I think people just take it for granted almost in some way, in a good way, a credit to it, that it feels like it's been around for 30 years and it's technically only the 10th year. It's not easy to sustain that, I think having friends who are programmers and working in the film festival land, it's like a struggle every year, and just because they've hit the 10th year here doesn't mean like, oh, now we're in cruise control, everything is going to take care of itself. It's like a hustle all the time. But watching shorts yesterday with a crowd, and then seeing Sing Street and then Wiener last night with a crowd, it's like, it is so vital, I feel like, for something like that to exist. And I don't know what the Dallas film scene was like before that, 10 years ago, but I feel like now the crowds are there and people are hungry for ambitious cinema.
Well, to kind of end things, Michael, what type of kolaches you guys buy?
We did. I did an egg, like I did a breakfast sort of situation.
So not fruit. You went.
Well, then we did a raspberry situation. I actually wanted a chocolate moon pie, so I wanted to get off the kolache grid, and it wasn't happening yesterday. So we did a raspberry kolache situation that was very yummy at I can't even remember the name of it now.
Well, West Texas represented.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Michael, thank you for bringing the short here, and I know it's a big deal for Jack, so it's really special to do it here in Dallas. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here.